scenarios and
Right.
explanations, so
Correct.
we'll talk about that. But first, we want to mention again that the Reasons to Believe Scholar team, including Ken, will be going on a cruise on August 15th, or rather 8th through 15th. And this is through Alaska's Inside Passage. I understand it's quite a great place to see some glaciers and probably whale watching and all kinds of fun stuff. Ken, I know you're looking forward to it, and we hope listeners will take advantage of that opportunity to join you and the Scholar team.
This is going to be a great time, Joe, because, the scenery is just remarkable, but it's also going to be a time where people can come and spend time with the scholars, have meals with them, be able to ask questions and interact about science and faith issues. So I think this is really going to be an enjoyable time. I know my wife is really looking forward to it. So I think people who sign up for this are really going to be blessed.
It's through Inspiration Cruises. You can go on our website, reasons.org. You'll find a place to click through and learn lots of great information on it, including a little video presentation. Bottom line is the prices have come down. They're quite reasonable. You can't beat the location, as Ken mentioned. I understand, I think there's a place called Glacier Bay National Park that you'll be going through, where some of these glaciers fall off into the sea. That would be quite a sight.
I'm told, Joe, that there are just some wonderful, day trips people can take, and
you can get off the boat,
get
here
off
and there.
the boat, and so I think this is something you will benefit from years to come if you're part of this.
August 8th through 15th. Be sure to go to our website, learn more about it. Okay, Ken, well, let's go ahead and talk about the topic for today, and I think you're going to talk about a couple of logical fallacies associated with this topic.
That's exactly right, Joe. When we get to the resurrection, naturalists often have two responses. One of them is they will say that only natural events occur, so the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus must be false or have some natural explanation. The problem with that kind of reasoning is it really kind of begs the question. That is, it assumes naturalism, and it ignores any counter evidence that would run against naturalism. You beg the question, or you engage in circular reasoning when you assume the truth of your conclusion rather than providing evidence or proof for that conclusion.
Okay.
It also fails to appreciate that these naturalistic explanations that we'll look at a little bit later in the series, they are woefully inadequate, and I hope to be able to illustrate that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that naturalists often do, and a naturalist is a person who says the material physical world is all there is, there's no supernatural realm, God doesn't exist, typically no life after death. Some skeptics will say miracles are exceedingly improbable. Well, the problem with that is that improbable scenarios sometimes do occur. I mean, look at our universe. Look at the fine-tuning that exists. Look at the fact that human beings, intelligent creatures exist. And also, what of the actual historical evidence for the resurrection? This seems to commit what is called in logic a priorism, meaning that you take the position that my position is true and no counter evidence can count against it. I've made up my mind, don't confuse me with the facts. No, I think that the appropriate way of looking at this is to say, look, what happened at the resurrection? What is the best explanation? What is the evidence?
Yeah. Could you say, let's say I put the naturalist hat on for a moment, well, I can understand your position, but you should be looking at any naturalistic explanation first before you automatically swallow this tale of a miracle. So would Reasons to Believe scholars say, okay, well, that has some merit. Let's look at a potential naturalistic explanation for it.
I certainly think any reasonable explanation, that is any explanatory hypothesis that fits an accepted criteria, also a topic we'll address a little later in the series. How do we know whether a hypothesis is actually one that's credible and worth our time. But to answer your question directly, I think if the naturalists have explanation, they should be evaluated to see if they have explanatory power, to see if they're consistent with the facts.
Yeah. Okay, what then is the evidence for Jesus' resurrection?
Well, let's talk about 6 different types of evidence for the resurrection, and I'm going to summarize these. All of this material is again in my book, Without a Doubt, chapter 10. I'll recommend some further books that can be read on this topic. But let me talk about 6 different steps of the resurrection. Joe, the first one is the empty tomb. The evidence for the empty tomb is very powerful and very strong. Jesus' tomb after the resurrection was empty. If Jesus' body was in that tomb, then the critics of Christianity could have gone to the tomb and quashed Christianity immediately. Mm-hmm. There's no way the disciples could have gone out and preached the resurrected Christ, and that was the central message of their preaching, if that tomb were anything other than empty. Now, what is helpful here as well, Joe, is that we appreciate that when the New Testament talks about tombs, it corresponds to what we know archaeologically about how tombs were made, what they were like. It corresponds to burial practices and things like that. And so one of the earliest presentations about evidence for Jesus' resurrection is that the tomb was empty and nobody was ever able to conclude or show anything other than an empty tomb. Mm. Yeah. So the first step of the powerful evidence. Mm-hmm. The second one, the post-crucifixion appearances. I mean, over a period of 40 days, Jesus appears to numerous individuals. He appears to small groups and large groups. Paul says at one point he appeared to more than 500 brethren. He appears to friends and enemies. He appears to his disciples, but he appears to his half-brother James, who was no believer in his brother's messianic identity. He appears to the Apostle Paul, who was utterly antagonistic toward the new Christian sect. Mm-hmm. He also appears to men and women. He appears to people inside dwellings, outside, and he allows his body to be viewed and inspected and analyzed. And so who is this person who is appearing? Now, we're going to look at how to evaluate a theory, but remember that a good theory is going to have to be able to explain not only the empty tomb, but also these post-crucifixion experiences that people are having for 40 days.
It's important, as you mentioned there, that he appears not merely to sympathetic witnesses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to suggest, for example, later some kind of hallucination, well, would James and Paul have hallucinations? You know, maybe Mary in her grief at the tomb might have an emotional breakdown, but that's not going to happen with James and Paul, who are set against all of these ideas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the second one.
A third evidence for the resurrection is the transformation of the apostles. Joe, one of the powerful things about the Gospels is that they don't present the apostles as kind of supermen, you know, who were these champions. Frankly, they show them as they really are. They were weak. They were afraid. The disciples after Jesus' crucifixion, they're broken. They're hiding.